My name was Nancy Ellis Anwell. Nobody could say what it was, so I went by Nurse EA. So my arrival at the hospital ship Repose in Da Nang was February 68 during the ending days of Tet. I left during Tet in 69, so I considered that a pretty good welcome and send-off. Shipboard life was different, and I now know what is meant by sea legs. Everything was compact, or another way of saying claustrophobic, and usually anchored in some way. The loudspeakers were always blaring, either incoming wounded, abandoned ship drills, or man overboard drills. One day we were surprised when a patient actually jumped overboard. The speakers blared, "Men overboard, this ain't no drill! Men overboard, this ain't no drill!" He was out of the water in 5 minutes and wet but unhurt and returned to the psych ward. So that was pretty good, to be able to respond like that. We knew the drills had paid off. We had everything we really needed, but always waited anxiously for mail call. We felt sheer terror one day as we watched the helicopter with the mail going into the water next to the ship. We had no idea what caused this, but the crew was more concerned with losing the mail than helping the pilot get to safety. We were lucky on the ship that we had good food, and even though it was good, everybody missed home cooking. And I had written an article that was in the Dallas Morning News editorial page. I was surprised to see. And 3 Alarm Chili Company sent me a case of 3 Alarm chili spices. So I made a great big vat of chili for the officers' mess and watched as it just evaporated. Every day was a new adventure, just waiting to be found. And one thing that please don't take this wrong, but the ship's captain at the time when I left was known as the Pimp of the Orient. My year in Vietnam was the one most significant event in my life. The experience helped mold me into who I am today, and I think made me a better person. The feelings that I had went the gamut, from very sad to happy, from contentment to anger on the verge of rage. The anger came from seeing the magnitude of mutilation that was inflicted on our soldiers and the Vietnamese people. Why? How could this happen, and again, why? We patched up those with minor injuries, and they returned to their units. And sadly, several times, I read their names in the Stars and Stripes as KIA, and that really hurt. The happy feelings came from working on the 2 wards with the Vietnamese children. Children have an innocence that helped to balance the reality of war. We did not speak the same language, but I could play games and read to them, and that would bring smiles and laughter to all of us. Most of the children had health issues, not war wounds. One of the boys, named Do Ku, was an 8-year-old who had a birth defect of his heart called tetralogy of Fallot, often called blue baby. He was brought to the ship with the hopes that they could correct at least some of the defects. Regrettably, he died after a heart catheterization. He was such a sweet little boy, always had a big smile that lighted up anyone's day. I was able to give him one last gift. I accompanied his mother to support her as she said goodbye to her little boy. No words were needed, just a tender hug. There were 2 other children who made a huge impact on me. An was born on the Repose and was the only baby born on the Repose since World War II. Her mother had received an extensive gunshot wound to her face, but was unaware at the time that she was pregnant. When she felt the baby move, there was a lot of concern because she had received daily sedation and wound debridement. The decision was made to keep her on board until after the delivery. An weighed 6 pounds and was perfect, thanks to the good nutrition for her mother. And a kind of funny thing, the mother had part of her recovery was making a big flap from her forehead down to her across her cheek so that she would be able to get the skin graft. The minute she was born, the physician who delivered her said, "Oh, look, she's got a flap just like Mama." Anne was another little girl who had a birth defect. Her knees bent the wrong direction. She walked on the back of her calves instead of her feet. Several treatments were attempted, including traction. She was my favorite, and the Vietnamese women and older children called her my baby son. Anne's mother knew her only chance was for her to go to the U.S., and she gave permission to adopt her so I could help. Sadly, the red tape never could be cut, and I had to go home without her. Since she had a deformity, chances are her survival was very, very slim. I will always miss Anne. I learned to keep feelings tucked inside and kept them there for years. The anger, hostility, and frustration generated by this war raged for years, spreading like a virus. When this misguided anger was directed to the military, keeping quiet was the safest place. Coming home to face the aftermath of war and this anger, the very soul was inflicted with deep scars that remain today. I kept everything inside until I saw the first episode of China Beach. Having been on China Beach, it seemed to legitimize my experience, and for the first time, tears flowed for several hours, and it was a definite relief. Recently, one of my sons commented that I had never talked to my children about Vietnam. That comment opened my eyes, and I want to fill that gap in the near future with memories both good and bad. We all looked for ways to find relief and looked for reasons to laugh. We needed laughter just to survive. Our uniforms, as Diane said, were white uniforms. Hose, shoes, caps, the whole thing. No, we couldn't wear earrings either. This could present a problem when you're giving patient care. Often, the patient in the upper bunk was the one who needed an IV started. I'd have to stand on the lower bunk, and yeah, every patient in the lower bunk looked up our dresses. Luckily, we found petty pants. Colorful, lacy, funny. We didn't care. Problem solved, and everybody had a good laugh. I will never forget the patients and staff with whom I worked on the repose. They came from every walk of life and situation imaginable, and from every corner of our country. Everyone brought a little piece of home with them, a faded picture or a tape of their favorite music. They all wanted to talk with someone from home, especially if you lived close to their hometown. These young people were the future of our country, and I held them in high regard. I include all of the corpsmen, nurses, physicians, Red Cross workers, and ship's crew in this group because they were each serving our country in a war zone, were far from home, and none of what we accomplished could have been done without them. As difficult and painful as the experiences were regarding the war and attitudes of the populace, the end result has been positive for me. I was able to define my values more clearly, and this has guided many life decisions. Learning about a different culture broadened my ability to search for the uniqueness of every individual. My family was able to sponsor two sisters, Dao and Hien, who had escaped the last day when Vietnam fell. We learned so much about life from them as we taught them about living in the U.S., including learning to drive in Los Angeles. Hien was still in high school and set a great example for my children on the value of good study habits. She was taking English, physics, U.S. history, plus some other subjects, and would sit with an English dictionary on one knee, the Vietnamese dictionary on the other while she studied. They are a treasured part of my family and remain very close. And in fact, Dow and her husband Jerry drove from Pittsburgh this morning to be here with me and my granddaughter Kelsey. Other values I have defined more clearly are that I am very comfortable sharing my talents however they are needed. I want to convey a caring attitude toward every person I meet, regardless of the circumstance. I appreciate every day, keeping an open mind and heart. I appreciate my own health. I chose to focus on the positive experiences I had, and I keep looking for the positive in every event. I have a t-shirt with the inscription, "I left Vietnam, but Vietnam never left me." I carry Vietnam with me every day and am proud to do so. There's one last event I want to share. About 7 years after I returned home into civilian life, I suddenly realized how small our world can be. I was teaching at UCLA, and while at one of the hospitals, I was about to exit an elevator. Just as the door opened, there stood Sergeant Sam, our translator, all the year on repose. We both yelled and hugged and talked as hard and fast as we could. He and his family had been evacuated safely and were living close by. Our families were able to visit and get to know each other, and most of all, to share the joy of freedom. Thank you, and God bless America.